Hi and welcome to the OCR Review, a podcast that covers all things OCR from all around the world.
The first truly international OCR podcast. We are from the UK, living in Asia and following the US racing scene to bring you a holistic overview of what's going on in OCR globally. Hello and welcome to episode 17 of the OCR Review. We are super excited today to be joined by Rea Kobl to be finally talking about World's Toughest Race Eco Challenge Fiji. So welcome Rea to the podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me, and it's exciting to finally be able to talk about it, so I'm ready.
Yeah, we were saying it's been a long time in the making. We were watching you guys prep for it last year a little bit with the few things that you were allowed to actually talk about, so it's great that now we get to pick your brain on all things from training to the actual race experience. So actually, I think that's going to be where I jump in and start, is how did you get involved in the first place? Because adventure racing isn't your kind of usual swim lane, right?
Yeah, definitely not. Out of all the things you need to know how to do, I knew how to do one, which is run and track. So it was just one of those things that it seemed really cool since I was like little, watching it on Discovery Channel back then. And then when I heard it's going to come out, it was like, it piqued my interest, but having zero adventure racing experiences, I knew there was no way I could put a team together that could do anything well. And so then in March, Ryan messaged me asking me if I want to join his team. And I feel like he didn't really finish the question yet when I already said yes, because I already knew everything about it. And so he was like, yeah, don't worry, we'll teach you how to bike and paddle and do all the ropes things. Like, just like tell us if you're in. So it didn't take a lot of convincing for me to commit fully to it and then buy a mountain bike probably the day after.
Oh my God, that's amazing. But then that must have been a really short time frame, right? It would have been, what, 6 months-ish for training?
Yeah, it was roughly 6 months. It turns out that the learning curve of mountain biking is really steep. So you quickly get bruises, cuts, and dislocated shoulders, but then you also learn really quickly how to do it. So it ended up being actually enough time for me to train for it. I didn't really train paddling as much as I should have, and I think neither did Ryan. Luckily, our upper body strength from OCR saved us a little bit, but I think there's a lot of room for improvement there that, you know, if we had more time, we probably could have done it more.
Yeah, I mean,
not a huge... Sorry, I was going to say not a huge amount of room for improvement as you still managed to come second. So...
Well, I think that's like
a little bit more.
That's the like most exciting part about this race, is that it was a team that never raced together before. We trained together for about 2 days before the race. I met the team assistant there in Fiji, so really It was like everybody was kind of learning each other in the race. And Ryan and I mean, I think Ryan didn't train paddling extensively either, and I probably did maybe 10 hours of paddling in my life before the race, and then there was 22 in the first stage. So that, I think that's exciting. There's a lot of room for improvement, and already with like everything that we can improve, we play pretty well. So I think we're all very excited for round 2.
I think us as well, and excited to hopefully see you guys in round 2, because I must admit, I feel like we saw a lot of different American teams, but every time you guys were on screen, we're like, it's Team Canada! Oh, they're gone again.
Yeah, I feel like we were very much of a dark horse. We weren't really one of the teams that they were planning on giving any screen time at all. Like when we started, we all lined up at the front, because I think Ryan and I are both used to lining up at the front. And then like the production crew came and they were like, Team Canada Adventure, can you guys scoot off to the left until like we were off of like,
oh no.
So it was one of those things that, you know, like you can't blame them. It like half of the team had zero adventure racing experiences, and sometimes I feel like our sport has more of a reputation of playing in the mud. So hopefully we can fix that over the years.
For sure. So, but that's interesting, because you'd think a team with limited adventure racing experience that could potentially be like an underdog story. So I don't know, maybe they missed a trick there, or maybe it's just because, you know, we're all massive fans, so we were like, we really want to see Rea and Ryan.
Well, I think that too, but I feel like in these races, like even teams that are doing well in the middle, you're not sure if they're going to keep doing well. So I feel like
Yeah.
the production crew just kind of waited for us to drop off. So, at the end, you can't show what you didn't film. So I think that was the big part of limited airtime, but hopefully more next time.
So part of you having a limited airtime was obviously we didn't get to know your team very well. Pretty much everyone listening to this, I imagine, is going to know you and going to know Ryan. But sort of talk us through who else is on the team, strengths and weaknesses and stuff.
Yeah, so the other two team members were Scott Ford and Bob Miller, and they're both very, very experienced adventure racers. So they were on the scene where Challange was airing originally like 18 years ago.
Wow.
And they were both actually in Fiji in 2002, which was the last year that Challange happened. And they both had to drop out due to jungle rot. And so I would say because of them, foot care was like on the top of our list of taking care of yourself throughout Fiji, and we all ended up with like 0 blisters and 0 issues. And Bob was the navigator, so he was really experienced in not getting us lost in the jungle. And then Scott is a great paddler, so Scott kind of picked up the slack that Ryan and I maybe didn't do so well on the paddling legs, and really like coached us through paddling. And I feel like we were both better paddlers at the end of the race than at the start. It was like basically an intense training camp for that. And so both of those, both of them are adventure races with extensive experience. And then the 5th member was Wayne Leake. And so he was a team assistant. So what a team assistant does is they drive the vehicle from camp to camp. There were 5 camps, and they set up the gear, they have food ready, we like refueled, restocked the gear, changed for another different leg. So Wayne was really just like the man behind the scene. So he fixed our bikes, washed our clothes, got everything ready. When we got there, one day he had pizza, which was amazing. The other time it was like fried chicken and fries. So he was just kind of there for us and knew what we needed before we needed it. And I feel like the support teams get a lot less credit, but they're still a very important part. So yeah, that rounds of the 5-person team.
I feel like there's so many things to unpack there, because I agree, like the support system, that's definitely kind of the unsung heroes in some of these. So I guess my question is, because like there's a lot of gear, right? You've got, like you said, you've got someone, a man in a van who's basically driving from camp to camp and everything else.
Yeah.
That must have been incredibly expensive, or do you get sponsored a certain amount of the gear, and then is it your responsibility or the crew person's responsibility to carry it from camp to camp? Oh, sorry, that's lots of questions.
Yeah, no, I feel like I can answer it as one general question. So I was traveling to Fiji with over 210 pounds of gear. So there was a lot. I had 3 oversized, overweight bags that somehow magically all were at the weight limit that's accepted. I think the lady was just a big fan of Challange that was checking me in. But the problem, or like the challenge with Fiji, was you can't buy anything there. So you had to bring all of your gear from whatever you were traveling to. And so we each had a 48-gallon gear box, basically, where everything was in. And then we tried to compartmentalize it so that even like sleep deprived, tired us would find things. And everything was labeled. We gave Wayne the rundown of where all of our things are, so he knew basically how we organized each of our boxes. And so he then basically just transported that. And when we arrived to a new camp, our box was waiting and our bike box was waiting, which is where the bike was put in. So we had to like assemble and disassemble our bike during the race as well, which we also got better as the race went on. And that's also another part of where we could probably improve for next time. But the gear actually ended up being a pretty expensive expedition. Last year we got a scholarship. So first they were going to allow sponsors, which is how we were going to fund it. And then at some point they decided nobody gets to have any sponsors, but here's $50,000.
Oh, wow.
So each team got $50,000, and it seemed like a humongous amount of money. Between the 5 of us, we used up about 40,000. So like that's all the flights and all the gear and all the training and all the certificates. It all ended up being roughly the stipend they gave us. So yeah, it was kind of like nobody expected that, and it was nice that it happened.
Yeah, because otherwise
it
that's
was like
really
much more affordable. Yeah.
Yeah, and it's I assume they got rid of sponsors because it was just too much hard work with TV licensing and stuff.
I feel like that was it, because the questions were like, how big of a logo can we have on a helmet and a bike and everything? And so at some point they were just like, all right, no logo anywhere. So yeah, it kind of changed as the show was being organized.
Yeah, because I feel like even with that, we noticed that a lot of people seemed to have similar gear anyway. Like there was one episode and we're like, is this just an ad for Specialized? Like every single bike that went through, it was like, there's a Specialized, there's a Specialized. So
yeah, the thing about those races is like you want to have the lightest gear out there. So that actually Ryan did an amazing job of like finding the lightest item of everything that was on the mandatory gear list, and we all got that. And so I'm assuming most of the teams that were gunning for the top positions did the same, because an ounce here, an ounce there, over 7 days, it all adds up. So even though like I already had a climbing harness and climbing carabiners, they were like twice as heavy as what was the lightest on the market. So we all just bought whatever was the lightest available, which also then ends up being more expensive. Hence the higher price tag for the race.
Yeah. Oh my goodness. Okay, so you've got 40 grand's worth of gear. You've managed to ship it all the way to Fiji. How much time did you have there? Did you get a chance to like recce and explore, or was it like down to business the second you got in?
We actually had quite a bit of time leading to the race, because we had to be there a little bit early because they had to do the testing. Like we had to pass the ropes test, and they had to teach us how to sail the Kamakau, which none of us really sailed before. And then they like did the team photos and team briefing and everything. So I think we were there a good like 3-4 days before the race started. And then because there was no time to really relax before then, because everybody was like on top of their nerves, and we all tried to like organize this like, I don't know, 200 pounds of food into this like 12-hour bags and 6-hour bags. And you like the food that you take on a paddle is different you take on a bike, so you want to like label everything. So that just took forever. Before the race there was no exploring Fiji, but after the race we were actually done 5 days before the cutoff. So we had 5 days to just relax, which consisted mainly of taking boats to different islands and taking naps on beaches. So there was a lot of that going on after the race.
Well, I think that's fair after, what was it, 4 or 5 days of like just basically being awake
almost
most of
7.
the time? Almost 7.
Yeah,
wow.
it was 6 days and 23 hours for us. So we just broke 7 days.
Oh my goodness, that is an epic week.
It was. I want to remember.
So you mentioned
amount of time.
Oh, sorry, go ahead, Sean.
I was just gonna say that's an insane amount of time to be just moving.
Yeah. And I think maybe going on to that, I personally always get overtraining injuries. It's something I'm working on, but definitely a big issue for me when I try and build volume is I always do it too quickly. How do you find the balance between training sensibly and increasing your volume for something where you know you're going to be moving for 7 days, and balancing that with overtraining? Or, I mean, you're quite a high volume athlete anyway. Was that a consideration for you as you prepared?
I just kind of stayed on the limit of basically being almost overtrained. There's probably a million ways I could have trained smarter. I just kind of did a lot. So I feel like my last year's season, the OCR racing I did was very mediocre, just because I was never really rested at the start line. I always kind of stayed on the very high volume, and like when something would start hurting, I would straddle the like fine line between this hurts like an injury to like this is still okay. I definitely didn't do as much. I feel like after Fiji I got a lot better at like cross training, so this is the first year where I'm not injured at all. And I think that's because I sort of fell in love with the bike, and I kind of do a lot of that, but I really didn't know how to properly train for it, so I just did a lot of time on my feet and a lot of time in the saddle. Not a lot of time in a boat. But yeah, and I was also racing a lot, so there was not really all that much time to train a lot in addition to that, because I was traveling and racing basically every other weekend almost.
Wow.
So yeah, I just try not to break and somehow make it. And I like West Virginia was the last race before Fiji, and I ran that race terrified because I was like, I can't sprain an ankle right now. Like I just get to the finish line in like a decent amount of time and don't break yourself before Fiji. So I feel like Fiji was definitely, my like a race for the year, and something I focused on, and everything else kind of took the back burner position for that.
Cool.
Amazing. Did you find that there was a transfer of some of the skills? So I guess the way that you would train for an OCR with the focus on slightly more upper body and grip work, did any of that transfer over into usable skills for Fiji? Did you find the two kind of compatible between adventure racing and OCR?
The upper body strength helped immensely because I don't think I would have gotten away with like 10 hours of paddling and survived the race if I didn't have the upper body strength that I had, and like the grip strength to, just like hold the paddle for that long. So that was definitely helpful. And like the mental side of OCR also transfers over. Like it's all the times that we've almost froze our butts off in Tahoe doing that alpine swim. I thought about that a lot when we were going through that really, really cold section in the river. And I think had I not have those experiences from being really cold and eventually warming up and being okay, I don't know if I would deal with that section as well as I did. And also like knowing the value of a wetsuit, because I've done OCR. It was really cool knowing just how much of a difference wetsuit makes. I did carry the extra weight to bring the wetsuit on that really cold section just because I knew that it can make a big difference. So I think experience and the mental toughness from like the more like gritty OCR races and the upper body strength all helped significantly in the race.
Wow, that's amazing. And I guess that is where you kind of say, yes, you guys were the underdogs for lack of adventure racing experience, but that transfer over, because they definitely showed a lot of time of people like freezing and shivering in that cold water
we
section.
were all freezing and shivering, but we just kind of kept moving through it. It was miserable. It was probably the worst part.
Oh gosh. But then I think you came back and Tahoe was what, a week, 2 weeks afterwards? Something
that
like
was dumb. I think I had 10 days. I wasn't planning on racing, but the weird thing about adventure racing is you do so many different things. You don't really get beat up in the same way that you get in, like, let's say a 24-hour OCR race, because you are in a boat and then you're on a bike and then you're tracking, but you're not doing any of those activities for like crazy. Well, it was still pretty long. Like it was like 8 to 12, 15 hours maybe.
Oh,
but then you
pretty long, yeah.
Pretty long, but it's always like pretty low intensity, and then you switch to something else. And so finishing the race, nothing really hurt. I was able to run 2 days later.
Wow.
But it's just your hormonal system is just so messed up from the lack of sleep that I was able to run for like 30 minutes, but then I had to go sleep for 2 hours or just things like that. And so it was weird for me because I felt okay. And so it's like, maybe I can give Tahoe a try. But as soon as you get into the fatigue state when you have to push a little bit harder, like I did one burpee and I was like, oh my God, this is going to be a long race, because I like knew back right away that I wasn't recovered nearly as much as I should have been. And so I wouldn't really say I raced Tahoe. I feel like I more like cried my way through that race and somehow managed to get to the finish line. But it was a miserable one anyway, so I guess with whatever else everybody else was doing.
Testament to mental grit for sure. I mean, you were kind of enduring days and days of that, and I think I got to Tahoe, and for the few hours I was out on course, it's like, it's snowy and it's cold and it's miserable. So the fact that you were doing that after 7 days on feet is incredible.
My friend made a poster, and I think he converted our racing time in Fiji into seconds, and then he wrote, this race is like, I don't know how many thousands of seconds shorter than what I just did in Eco Challenge, so I can make it to the finish line. And I saw that and I just like started crying. So it's different challenge. And I think if the same thing happens next time, I don't think I will race 10 days later. I think I'm taking a month off.
Fair. Well, I think we'll get to next time, because I think between us we've got lots of questions about what you would do differently for training, but I'd love to dive into some of the actual on-course experience things. So one of the things you mentioned earlier was that your two kind of more experienced team members were really on it with the foot care, which is something that we saw some of the other teams going out because of. It looked like you guys had incredibly wet and muddy and treacherous conditions the whole time. How do you take care of your feet and just keep healthy and injury free during something like that?
Yeah, our feet were basically wet for 7 days straight, which if you ask me before doing that, if like my feet could survive that, I'd be like, no, thank you. But what we did was every time we stopped, we took our shoes off, socks off, and dried our feet. So we had so many pairs of socks and so many pairs of shoes in all the different gear boxes that were dry. So whenever there was a chance, we changed into dry things. So maybe they were dry for like 5 minutes, but that's still better than like having them perpetually wet. And then every time we got to a camp, which was 5 times during the race, we had this like bath of antibacterial, some sort of solution with water. So we all stepped in there, splashed around in there, cleaned all the junk off of our feet, and then put in moisture barrier cream, which basically kind of prevents some of the water coming into through your skin into making it like all soggy. And then we just put a bunch of Garnier on it, which is like a really good like anti-chafing cream. And then dry socks, dry shoes, dry everything. So that actually got us through really well. But what my other two, Scott and Bob, what they got out of is called jungle rod. That's what made them drop out last time. And the way that feels is like you're walking on rocks, but then there's actually no rocks in your shoes. So every time we felt like we had rocks in our shoes, we just like really hoped that it was actually rocks and not jungle rod. And so like when the rocks are out, we're all like celebrating. But it was definitely one of the things that we were all scared of, because it's sort of like one of those things you don't have much control over, other than just like try to do your best and hope that you don't get any bacteria in any of the cuts. Our hands, I feel like, got more demolished because I forgot to take care of my hands, and so I feel like I had more blisters on my hands than I did on my feet.
Oh no!
But we all fared pretty well in terms of injuries. Nobody really had anything significant.
What shoes did you go for? I love shoes.
I think Ryan was using VJs and Hokas, but all of the other, like the rest of us, were using Hoka Speedgoats. They're really, really cushioned, and they're not as high stack, so they're a little bit more ankle roll proof. But that ended up working pretty great for the conditions there. We should have gone like what Fijians did, which is barefoot. That was pretty impressive, watching the locals just like run around the hills and the jungle barefoot way faster than what we did.
Oh my gosh. And did you guys run in the end? Because watching some of the teams that were hiking, that was something that kept on going through my mind, like with you guys being all such proficient trail runners. Were there runnable sections, or was it just a slow slog the whole time?
We ran a fair bit of it, which is what I think gained us a bunch of positions. So actually, when we started the race, it started with paddling. It was supposed to be sailing, but there's no wind. So we spent like probably 20 hours paddling in the first leg. But in between that, there was I think 20 kilometer or 25 kilometer trek around the island. And Ryan and I, not knowing any better, we just started running, and like Bob and Scott entertained the idea and ran along. And when we pulled in, we were probably like 20th or 30th boat on the shore, because there were a bunch of boats already docked. And then we finished the trek, and it was dark out, and we just got in the boat and started paddling away. We had no idea what place we were in. We knew that we passed a good number of teams on the trek, but we like paddle, and then a media boat catches up with us, and they're like, "Can we guys talk to you?" And we're like, "Sure, we have nothing better to do." And so they go like, "How does it feel being in the lead?" And all of us go like, "Excuse us? we're what?" So I think like in adventure racing in general, people tend to track a lot, and we are just used to running, so we ran a lot. So I think that was definitely our strength. And so we didn't run like the super bushwhacky jungle uphills, because you waste so much energy trying to run those things. But whenever there was a fire road, or whenever there was more like downhill or flat sections, we definitely ran all of those sections.
Wow. And because we saw that there were some bushwhacking sections and everything else, were there, did you guys take shortcuts or did you get lost at any point?
We didn't take any shortcuts just because it seemed like fairly obvious where to go with the race intended us to go. And the shortcuts didn't seem that much shorter, and we knew the jungle was really, really dense. So
yeah,
we knew we can move really fast in more of the open area. So we kind of took that to our advantage. And yes, we did get massively lost. On the second to last leg, there was this like long track through the grassland, and the map wasn't very good for that section. So the navigation was hard. And the description just said follow the trail that locals used to cross the river. But we were there at like 2 a.m. So there were no locals to ask where they crossed the river. So we were probably wandering in those tall grasses for 5 hours, not knowing exactly where we are or where the trail is. And we knew that like we started that part of the race in second place, and when we were lost there for like 5 hours, we thought we lost so many places and our chance at a podium. And Ryan and I got so tired on that section that we were both falling asleep as we were walking. And so we just asked everybody that we needed like 30 minutes of sleeping. And we all just like lay down on the ground across the trail and fell asleep immediately. 30 minutes later, we woke up like, I always felt like I got 10 hours of sleep on this like 30-minute naps. And then we like found the trail, ran to the next section. It was like I think an 8K track that we ran like as fast as we would if we were like fresh doing that the first thing in the race. And we got to the camp and we found out we didn't lose any positions, but we did lose quite a bit of lead that we had. So the next teams were like trailing right behind us. So at that point we had to decide if our original plan was to sleep in that camp and then push the last leg. But if we slept, then we would have lost our place because all the other teams didn't pass us because they did sleep. So we knew they were all much fresher than us, but we decided to push on. So that made for the last 60 hours of the race basically going on 30 minutes of a nap, which was really, really hard because we finished in boats. So like try being in a rocking boat, trying to stay awake. It's like almost impossible. So yeah, that was I think our only really major getting lost. There was another section where you're supposed to like track up the river, but we went up into like, it was also at night, so we went up into the wrong like river channel, and then we realized we were lost. We turned around and there were a few teams that were doing the same thing, but they saw us, so they're like, oh, I guess we're turning around too. And that was like the second one where we maybe lost like 45 minutes. But other than that, like Bob is really good at navigating, so we had like a pretty smooth race other than that one like lost in tall grasses mistake.
That's amazing. And especially like 30 minutes of sleep for the last section is, I mean, how did you make those judgment calls? Was it a team decision? Was it a team captain decision? Was it just based on if people seemed fresh?
Yeah, I think that's really what made our team do so well. Even though we didn't train before with each other, we all wanted to do well more than we cared about how we felt. And so I think it was never really a question. Like we all just kind of, we didn't even have to talk about it. We were all in it 100%. And one thing that I really noticed that I didn't appreciate about team races before as much as maybe then is just how much I was worried about the team as a whole rather than just myself. So you always know how tired you are. And there were like some mountain biking sections when you were going really, really fast and downhill. And I knew I could do them, but I was so worried that somebody else was too tired and too sleepy to do them. And so that just like adds on additional stress to the whole part of the race because you can control yourself, but you can't control what other people do. But I think the entire team was just so driven and so willing to give like 100% and more that it was never really a question whether or not we're going to push through or take a nap. Like the nap was out of the question the moment we knew that we were still in the second place.
Cool. Was there anything you found that you sort of expected to be not easy but okay that ended up being more difficult than you thought it would be?
I think eating was really, really hard. I in general, I love snacking. So coming into the race, I was just so excited to try all of my like boba bar flavors and spring energy gels and all the other kinds of like bars that I never tried before. I just like couldn't wait to like eat that for a week straight. But like it turns out your stomach can only really manage so many times of like snack an hour every hour. And so day 5 or 6, I had the worst heartburn I've ever had. And so I really couldn't eat anything anymore.
Oh.
And I was just really glad that we were on the last leg and really close to the finish line. So I was just like, well, if I bonk, like, who cares? I'm at the finish line. But I don't like, I feel like that's one thing I have to figure out for the next time if we do go longer, is how to make sure my stomach doesn't just say that it's done with snacks. I think one thing is like I really probably need to work on variety. Like when they told me to bring a variety, I brought a variety of boba bar flavors, and that doesn't really work that way. So I think that was the fueling part was probably the hardest, because you can only go for as long as you have the energy to do so.
And you mentioned earlier that you had different foods that you would take for paddling sections versus trekking sections, and then you would have different food when you're at the camp. How did you plan what you would take for those, and also how much food that you would carry?
Yeah, Scott and Bob really helped us with that, just with the experience. But we generally try to aim for like 300 calories an hour. So you look at the map, because at each section you like looked at the map and you figured out about how long you're going to be there, and you knew what the disciplines are going to be, and so you would just pack that kind of food. And before the race, we had everything in like small Ziploc bags that said how many hours worth of fuel is this and what kind of fuel is it, because when you're on a mountain bike you can't really eat a bag of chips because you have to hold on to handlebars. So mountain biking food has to be something you can quickly squeeze into your mouth and then chew on it. So like spring energy gels are great for that. Like Cliff chew blocks are great for that. Granola bars don't really work. I lost like so many granola bars, like opening a wrapper, putting it in my mouth, and then it flies away, and they're like, oh, no. I guess that was lost. And then on track you can really eat anything. So on the track it was like things like chips and crackers and just more real food that kind of breaks up the, energy bars and gels that you're so sick of after like 2 or 3 days. And then in the camp, you really have access to anything. So we try to do as much of real food there as possible. So Wayne had like opportunity to stop at like restaurants and get us like pizzas and things like that. And we had backcountry food that we just reheated and ate those meals. Something warm and solid and not sweet.
Cool.
Was there anything you found yourself craving like at weird times? Like were you on a boat and just thinking, I really want some chicken or something like that? Or was it pretty much just...
I think every time before coming to the camp, we started craving real food because we know it was going to be there. And so I craved pizza, and we got to camp and there was pizza. And then I craved fried chicken and there was fried chicken. So I feel like Wayne had a way of like reading my mind what I wanted. And then right before the last leg, there were like volunteers and they had some pineapple fried rice and they gave that to us. And it was like the best thing ever. So I think like at some point eating just becomes part of the race, and it's not really something you're necessarily looking forward to. It's just more like a necessity, you have to do. But when we finished the race, the first thing I ate was I went to a store and got myself broccoli and hummus. And that was what I had, because I just like craved something fresh and vegetables and non-processed food. So
it's nuts. I imagine a lot of people would think after doing 7 days you'd be like, all the junk food, I want a massive pizza or a burger, but actually vegetables, that seems pretty...
Yeah, because you eat junk food when you're there like the whole time, so like you're so over it that I just wanted something that's not that.
Amazing. Okay, so I have a question, and maybe it's more of a girly question, but obviously you're one female, team of males. How do you deal with like showering and toilet issues and all that sort of thing? Do all like kind of boundaries of like personal space just go down?
Yeah, there's absolutely no showering. Peeing and pooping happens on the race course whenever there's opportunity. And one thing that I noticed is like really in these races, nobody really cares. You got to the camp and people are changing in front of everybody. There's like, that just like takes a backseat and nobody pays attention to anybody doing whatever. So I guess growing up in Europe, I'm like pretty comfortable with not being clothed in front of people. So I didn't find that to be difficult at all. But it's definitely like, I'm sure you could like go hide behind a tent, but you know, that wastes probably 2 minutes that you could use napping. So it's all about just how can you do things the quickest you can and then move on to the next part of the race. But yeah.
No, that's fair.
How
I mean,
good was...
No, go ahead.
Sorry. I was going to say, how good was the first shower after the 7 days of not showering?
It was pretty great. I think I spent about 2 hours in the shower trying to untangle my hair that turned into dreadlocks in the week of not being washed. But yeah, that and like bed with like nice sheets was amazing.
Did you find as part of your recovery that you just slept like exponentially more? Or did you find that your body for a while didn't want to sleep because it was used to not sleeping?
Oh no, my body slept great. We crossed the finish line. I fell asleep. We had to take a 2-hour boat ride from the finisher island to the main island. And the way, like the seas were really rough and choppy. So the boat was like moving up and down. And I slept through the whole thing. And Ryan said that I was literally being thrown in the air and like landed back on the bench. And that didn't wake me up. So
oh my God.
It was just, my body was just like, we're done. We're checking out. Talk to us in 20 hours. And even then it took like probably a week of sleeping 14 to 16 hours every night and then taking naps during the day, which I never do, to really get back to that. So I think the lack of sleep took the biggest toll on my body in terms of all the other race damage.
And then after those 2 weeks, did you feel kind of back to normal, or, well, I guess then you went out and raced Tahoe in the middle, but how long did it take for you to feel like your body was recovered from the 7 days?
I think it was about a month almost. I went to Europe kind of late October, just to like go to Greece and like do then Sweden 24-hour race. And it wasn't until I pretty much went to Europe and really took it easy, and it was kind of like vacation mode. And I think that finally recuperated my body and I was then back on track. But it was quite a long time.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, I can only imagine.
Yeah.
But then you went.
I've got loads of questions that are very much uninteresting to anyone listening that I'm going to ask you at other points about recovery and stuff. But
oh no, we'll go for it.
Fascinating. I just no, they're very much not interesting to anyone that wants to listen. I just find it fascinating how bodies recover and how they respond to those extreme stressful situations. And like you say, like you found yourself sleeping loads and then you sort of raced and wasn't quite right and like had different like energy level issues, and it took a really long time to get back to normal. Whereas like I think like you have one of the best endurance bases in OCR. Like the Sweden races, stuff like that, just seeing how consistent you are in them. And so it fascinates me that then there's this next level of like, I'm going to put my body in that month of recovery that other people get from one ultra race.
I think like what was even harder to recover than my body was my mind. I feel like this year and all the canceled races, I think sort of saved almost my racing career, because after doing Fiji and then slogging my way through Tahoe and then doing Sweden, I tried to do 100K trail race in January and my brain was just like, nope. So I did like the first 10 kilometers and after that, all I wanted to do was quit for the next 90. And even like when March rolled around and Spartan Ultras were going to pick up, which is something that I absolutely love doing, I didn't feel like racing. And I think it was just too much. Like, I feel like my brain kind of ran out of the mental strength to push through the hard races and hard situations. And it's like coming around now, which is like almost a year later, that I finally feel like I have the mental capacity to sign up for a race and push through a hard race, and like really look forward to it. So I think I think that was like something I totally didn't expect was going to happen. But I guess you only have so much of like mental push to do the hard stuff.
So just sort of coming off that a little bit, you said, I remember you sort of posting earlier in the year that your focus was going to be on ultras this year, obviously before everything ended. Is that still the plan sort of going forwards? Is it going to be, are you still focusing on ultra ways?
I don't think I'm ever going back to short. I feel like it's one of those things when the bigger things that you do, the harder it is to find those challenges that really excite you again. So I feel like adventure racing, it being like a multi-sport adventure, I found that I really need the races now to be really, really hard to like make me really, really want to do it. So I don't think I'll ever go to like short races again. Partly also because I love to train now the way that I just go out on adventures and do long things and do long rides and long runs. And that way, like, I'm just not competitive in short stuff, and it's not something that sparks my interest. So why do it?
Yeah, no, exactly.
For sure. Awesome. And do you think that will come with a switch to adventure racing completely, or are we still going to see you on some of the longer OCR races?
Well, I'm not a super fan of paddling. I think I'll stick to pull-ups and OCR races to maintain my upper body strength. I feel like with anything, it's important to have some sort of balance. So I think switching completely over to adventure racing would take that away, and I don't want that to happen. And one thing that I noticed that I did miss a lot this year was just the community. So if not for else, I'd stick with OCR because of all the friends that I have there. And I mean, ultra races have their challenges of their own. So I don't think I'm leaving that world anytime soon. But yeah.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. So I have a question. You mentioned Sweden earlier. Did doing a 24-hour race feel like a walk in the park after having raced for a week?
Absolutely not, because it's 24 hours at a lot higher intensity.
Okay.
I ran all of the uphill in Sweden. I ran 0 uphill in Fiji. So and it was 24 hours of doing the same thing over and over. So I feel like my body was a lot more smashed after Sweden than it was after Fiji. And it was one of those things when after Sweden, I like couldn't get out of bed the next morning, and I couldn't really walk like a normal person the next day, which didn't happen in Fiji. So I feel like there's just such different events. Just because something is shorter, it isn't easier. I think anything you do the best you can, and if you do it at your limit, everything is really hard. Anything from a 5K to a 7-day race. So I think both of those races, I pushed myself pretty much to the limit, and so they were both extremely hard.
Yeah, I guess hard, but different ways. Then looking to next year, I guess now, because it doesn't look like any of us are going to be racing this year at all.
I am.
Oh gosh, yes, because they've started again in Europe, haven't they?
Europe got their like stuff together early on, so you guys are having fun now.
Yeah, I'm just about to sign up for the UK race in about 4 or 5 weeks, so
nice.
Hopefully, I'm hoping I've not jinxed it, but yeah.
Touch wood. So yeah, whereas here we've just seen Philippines have just cancelled all of the Spartan races that was supposed to happen end of the year. So yeah. I'm holding on out for beginning of next year. It's what it is. So although there's still a Tough Mudder in the calendar for November, apparently.
Okay.
Looks like it's going ahead. So watch the space in Singapore. But looking at how you're planning for next year, I had a cheeky look at your Strava, and I can see you've been doing a little bit more paddling recently. Does that mean are your kind of sights set on the Eco Challenge for 2021?
Definitely. We applied the day it opened. The whole team is coming back. We
Amazing.
have an unfinished business that we have to attend to. So I already looked into horseback riding lessons, which is one discipline that's going to be in Patagonia, and I've never been on a horse before.
Wow.
So yeah, we don't know if the 2 potential race dates are February or November, and it just depends on COVID. I don't really see them pulling it off in February, just given the state of the world at the moment, but we're all going to train to be ready for it 10, which is slightly more challenging with paddling through the winter. But
Yeah.
we'll see how it goes. There's always pull-up bar to paddle on.
Yeah, although I imagine because it's not quite a double-armed movement, I guess, depending on, lots of single-arm pull-ups.
Yeah.
Just get on the ski egg.
Yeah, that's an option that we were gonna do if all else fails, or like attach a paddle to a rower and pretend you're paddling on a rowing machine. There's like ways around, but I think it's still, like with everything, more pleasant to do the actual sport.
Yeah, that's fair. So, and is there anything else you have changed in your training in preparation for next year?
Well, my goal is to be slightly less overtrained in the months leading up to it. So I increased my bike volume significantly and decreased my running volume significantly. So last year I was running 80 to 90 miles a week, and I'm at around 50. And that seems to be the golden mileage for me, where I don't get injured, but I think I still get the aerobic benefits, and then just doing more adventure races in prep for it. I think those are the two biggest things.
Cool. So you've still been able to do a few adventure races this year then?
Yeah, adventure races are very socially distant. You see other teams at the start and then maybe at the finish. So yeah, one of them happened like 2 weeks ago. It was like a small 24-hour one, and then a bigger one is scheduled for May. So there's a few things still happening, but really like more of the smaller races and nothing on the big scale.
Cool.
Sorry,
go ahead.
Sorry. So like now that you've changed your training and you're sort of focusing on things you enjoy and only sort of racing the things you enjoy and training how you enjoy, have you found, I know you said like this year, the break from racing has sort of saved your passion for it. Have you found like a renewed passion? Has it changed how you feel about racing and competing, being able to train the way you want to train in the way that makes you happy?
Yeah, I never sit in the car at a trailhead anymore for 30 minutes before my run. So I did that a lot last year. I feel like there's very few times that I'm not excited about what I'm going to do. I also started training a lot more with people. I run a lot with people. I bike a lot with people. I don't really chase Strava records anymore. And surprisingly, that makes me very happy. So I think it's just one of those things that you go through waves. I feel like, going really fast and going slow made me really happy last year. And it's just one of those things you have to recognize when you have to change things. I'm sure it'll change again at some point. But right now, especially with no races on the horizon, I just focus on really enjoying almost every workout, not every single one. Sometimes it's a slog, but on that, like on average, I feel like I'm way happier out there than when you try and focus and get a certain mileage in.
Oh, that's really cool. And it looks like you've done some incredible adventures as well recently. Like I think I messaged you the other day and asked about your Via Ferrata ropes course that you ended up doing. And it looks like you have incredible access where you are, or is that just because you're traveling and, going around to where you need to be?
I have a van, which helps a lot, especially now where you don't really want to be going to hotels and like Airbnbs and things like that. So my boyfriend and I travel in the van around Colorado a lot. And I feel like this break from racing kind of let me explore more of my backyard as well. All of these places that I go to are within a few hours drive, which I never had a chance to do before because I was gone most of the summer racing somewhere else. So I'm definitely enjoying it, and just being able to see more what's out there in the state that I live rather than like fly to other states and explore there. So I think there's time for everything. And I think COVID kind of made everybody slow down a little bit and explore their backyard and things that they can drive to, which is not necessarily a bad thing.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, even for us, like Singapore is, a fairly small island, but I feel like now I've really gone out and explored like so many places and been like, oh, there's like a park connector here that I didn't know about, or there's a tiny trail that takes me into the jungle and it might be short, but it's got a really steep hill, and that's pretty cool.
Exactly. I feel like it's easy to like not explore your backyard because you always feel like you're going to have time for that at some point later. And then usually you end up not knowing your home time as well as, other places. So I think it's good to see those backyard trails that have short, steep hills.
For sure.
Yeah.
In which case, I only have one question left, which is more to do with what your favourite workout recently has been. So, Sean, I'll maybe throw over to you in case you've got anything else before I jump to that one.
No,
you said you had lots of recovery questions.
Yeah, I have questions, but no, it's lots of boring sciencey stuff that I don't know that people really want to listen to. I'll pick your brains about it at another time if that's okay.
That's perfect.
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Well, in that case, one of the things that we normally close off with is we ask people what their favourite workout of the week has been, which for you, I feel like needs to be rephrased to what's been your favourite adventure of the week.
Yeah. So of this past week, I think I ran up Mount Sneffels, which is a 14er in Colorado where we just were. And the trail was just amazing. The first half was actually runnable, which in Colorado means like 12, 13, 15, 16-minute miles. And then we got to this stunning blue lake. And then the trail became really steep, at which point you had to hike. And then the last half a mile was just this rock scramble up a ridge line with like extreme exposure, but so beautiful. And then the top was tiny with like 360 view of all the mountains around you. So just like the variety of modes to get up there, from like running to walking to crawling on all four, was amazing. And then on the way down, we boat swam in the Alpine Lake, which was like the icing on the cake. So I think that was probably my favorite adventure of the week. Usually my favorite runs these days are not runs at all. They involve some sort of crawling on all four on some sort of rock formation somewhere up high.
That sounds pretty amazing, like chasing the adventures for sure.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, I think in that case, we will leave it there and just say thank you so much for sharing with us. I know that we've kind of bombarded you with loads of questions because there was so much that we didn't get to see of Team Canada Adventure that we were like, we want to ask all the questions, and especially hearing about how you guys prepped your food and your gear. And it sounds like you had a really kind of logistical and scientific approach to the race, which is something that I think we find really fascinating. It's been interesting to hear how you actually really seem to have everything quite kind of methodically organized for the whole thing, so you could then just go out and enjoy as well. I think actually that's what I'll ask you as final question. You were out on the course. Did you, like, it looked like the scenery was stunning. Was it head down the whole way, or did you actually get a chance to just be like, wow, we're in Fiji and this is epic?
There were so many wow, we're in Fiji, this is epic moments. There was the slot canyon we swam through that was incredible. The climb up the waterfall when you finally look around and you see the jungle it came from was just breathtaking. Few of the mountain bike leg sections were like climbing to the top of like a mountain, and then you would see the jungle around you where it was just like this massive expanse of trees everywhere, and like big rocks. So there was a lot of that. There was a lot of looking down at your feet, but also a lot of looking up and just appreciating the fact that we get to experience Fiji in a way I don't think many people do.
No.
Awesome.
That's incredible. Well, thank you so much for your time. We really appreciate you taking some time off on your Sunday evening to come and chat to us. So we're excited to share this with the guys out here in Asia, who I'm sure will be very excited to hear a little bit more about what you guys have been up to. So thank you.
Perfect. Pleasure was all mine.
And that concludes this episode of the OCR Review. We hope you enjoyed it, and we'd love to hear from you, so please hit us up on our social media channels. You can email us at theocrreview@gmail.com, find us on Instagram at theocrreview, or on Facebook at the OCR Review.
Remember to send us your thoughts, questions and suggestions for future episodes, and please do subscribe on Spotify, Apple or your podcast platform of choice and leave us a review. We've been
Ilona,
Jay,
Sean
and Jesse.
and this is the OCR Review. Thanks for listening.